driving. Hope comes and stops us in our tracks. Bravely we prove in our striving, trudging together each day. Where there's a will, there's a way.
Everybody, and welcome to Raw Recovery, a Trudging Together podcast. My name is Dion. I'm going to be your host today. Today is our 91st podcast, We've had a lot of stories. We've had a lot of education. But I always like to bring you different types of stories in recovery. You know, I found that alcoholism and addiction is a family disease. And there's a lot of times that people in the family that are affected by the alcoholic will get into helping others. A lot of times these people have very big servants' hearts. And since this is a family disease, I thought taking on a different perspective today would be great. So I have asked Melanie, and I hope I'm saying your last name correctly, Rapier.
Yes.
She is the director of the Pueblo Rescue Mission. Welcome to the show, Melanie.
Thank you for having me. I'm glad to be here.
Yeah. Melanie and I have been doing a little bit of talking back and forth, and we feel that storytelling and education is really important. So the reason that I don't want to tell her story, but Melanie does have her own story as to why she is involved with the Pueblo Rescue Mission. So we're going to listen to Melanie's story today, and this is where I give the show on over. So Melanie, if you want to get started, and we'll just kind of go from there. Great having you.
Great, thanks for having me. I'm sure my story is very similar to some and very different to some, but I want to start out and share with you. Growing up, I grew up with a two-parent family initially, but it got very dysfunctional very quickly. I had a father who was very narcissistic, a professional bodybuilder, and the domestic violence that ensued in our home as I was growing up was really rough. And it intensified. My mom and dad were married. It was my dad's second marriage. My dad kind of developed this pattern of creating new families and then leaving and then getting into another family. And looking back, I think probably the reason for that was he grew up in an alcoholic household. And I think there just wasn't enough love, enough attention. And so I think it definitely broke him in a lot of regards. So we struggled with that. My mom finally got out of the situation. But unfortunately, I think what happened, it created kind of an enabling heart in her. Because I think she kind of always felt she needed to make up with us kids for the drama, the violence, the negativity.
I think as a parent, I would feel that way.
Yeah. And I think we feel guilty even for the things we shouldn't feel guilty for. So when there really is something, I think it gets intensified. And I think she was always trying to feel like she had to make up for things. And my dad's habits were such that he would go on, get a divorce, create a new family, and then the families before just kind of fell away. It was kind of like we were disposable. And so I think we all kind of process that differently. I know there's a lot of theories and people that talk about there being placement about children, first child, middle child. I don't know that I believe so much in that because I think we're so unique that we all see our family differently. You know, I talk to my own children now, and my daughter will say something that was horrible and traumatizing to her, and my son will say, what house did you grow up in? I don't remember, because he perceived it differently.
Yeah, it was a different perspective. And you're talking about the dysfunctional family. And sometimes, you know, in a family, you might take on two roles in that dysfunctional family.
And so I think that in my perspective, my path of addiction, or the way it played out for me, and how I saw my dad's kind of devaluing of me and the drama and the violence in our household, as what about me wasn't good enough that he didn't want
Yeah.
to spend time with me, or what made me disposable. And so an addiction plays out in different ways. For me, it played
Sure.
out into a serious issues with food. Um, by,
Ah,
by the time I
okay.
was 30, I was probably close to 400 pounds.
Okay.
And so that was my struggle. I kind of took on eating as a way to, I think, guard myself and provide myself comfort that I didn't get, from my household because of all of the chaos.
And
Um,
I'd like to let the audience know, because we have no camera. Melanie looks healthy, my friends. She is a great example of looking healthy. So
well, thank
great
you.
job.
Thank you.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
I think my sister, my younger sister, Melissa, for her, it played out in a drug addiction.
Okay.
She was my dad was very performance based.
All
If
right.
you were doing good and you were great and you were thin and you were pretty and you were successful and you were all of the things that would make
Mm,
him look better, then he
yeah.
was all about you and wanting to have you in his life. But if you weren't great at everything, then he just did not have the time or day. And so that weighed heavy on her in that
Mm-hmm.
way. And so she started drugs at a very early age, about 14. She started using drugs. By the time she was 17, she was
Yeah.
fully blown into heroin, and our life changed dramatically. Um,
Yeah.
I think she is probably the reason why my path in life took me through mental health,
Yeah.
because I could see all of the things and the dynamics and the brokenness, and I just thought, how do families come from this? How do they resolve it?
Yeah.
Why do people end up in these vicious cycles? Why do people who are beaten as children turn around and become abusers themselves? And then why do
Yeah.
the others, don't do that at all? And so it intrigued me, and so I followed a path of mental health professional,
Ow.
and just for the last 30 years, I've been in the mental health field. Started out as a psychiatric nurse, and then moved into to becoming a therapist and a counselor over the course of that time. And I spent those 30 years, almost 30 years, in Las Vegas, Nevada,
Okay.
in the mental health field.
Okay. Yeah. Um, what we're talking about is breaking those generational cycles. I'm going through
Exactly.
that. I'm going through that with my kids too, and because I wasn't the best. I'm an alcoholic, and I wasn't the best example. I'm definitely a better example now, but understanding that we can break these generational cycles of anger and hate. Growing up, I didn't get much attention from my dad. If you did something good, you got cash,
Yeah.
and I, I to this day, I'm not about money. But you know me well enough. I don't care about money.
Yeah. And
So
it's funny, and I think my mom was that same way. Let's go shopping. What can we do to soothe this wound? Let's go
yeah,
out to eat. Let me write you a check. Let's go buy some clothes.
hmm
We'll go to the large size ladies store because you're barely even fitting into those clothes. But let's
yeah,
mask what the issue is and not talk about the problem, and let's just go get you something.
yeah.
Yeah.
It's a well, I grew up in a we sweep things under the rug kind of a situation. We don't talk about those things.
Yes. Yes.
And even when my mom did get sober, she got sober when I was 14. We had a family meeting, and that was the last family meeting we ever had, because it just, my brothers and my sisters couldn't handle it.
Right.
They couldn't handle the separation and the divorce. It came to me, and I told them, "You two are miserable. I'm glad you're splitting up because you're making the rest of us miserable." And
Yeah. I was
you
like that
know,
too.
yeah, I kind of saw things for what they were. Um, and I thought I was honest, but I was being kind of brutally honest. I wasn't being very nice.
Yeah, I know. It's funny, you see these TV shows and these movies and Lifetime things where a couple's getting divorced and they say, okay, let's like sit our children down and let's talk about it because you don't want it to be dramatic and you're afraid what's going to happen. And then I watch shows like Intervention and I kind of see where these people spiral out of control and what
Yeah,
started these. And it always almost seems like it starts with there was a divorce. And I thought
yeah,
to myself, that's very strange to me because I remember when my mother told me, I felt a weight lift off of me that
yeah,
was actually physical. the fact that they were not going to have this toxic thing going on where
Yeah.
my dad would lock me out of the house so he could beat the hell out of my mother while I stood outside
Yeah.
and listened to her scream.
It's a relief.
Yes, it is.
It was for me too, because they were creating a chaos in the family that just wasn't fair to everybody.
No.
And but at the same time, the only way I knew how to get that across was anger, because that's what I was taught. So I used my skills, and because of that, my parents, tough love was big at the time.
Yeah.
So they put me in Mount Airy Psychiatric Center, and I never went back home because of my behavior.
Wow.
That helped me, but it hurt me. So
right, a double-edged sword, like a lot of things.
Exactly. So in Vegas, did you grow up in Vegas? Is that kind of why you did most of your work there?
No, I grew up in Southern California.
Okay.
And we
bodybuilding. Okay.
Yeah, and so we were in Southern California, and then I got married, and my husband got offered a job working in one of the casinos in Las Vegas, where he was going to be working, doing surveillance cameras and putting stuff together in the casino.
Ooh, that actually sounds kind of fun.
Yeah, they set up the eye in the sky actually for a company called Station Casinos.
No.
So I didn't even want to go because I was born and raised in California. My family was there, but we went, and it was actually great. Once I got to Vegas and got roots and started doing things, you couldn't drag me away. In fact, I can't believe, a lot of my friends are like, we can't believe you're in Colorado, that you stayed. But it was life changing, and it was great to be there. There's a lot of stuff going on in Las Vegas. I had a set of twin girls that were born and passed away in Las Vegas, and then I had a second set of twins that were born in Las Vegas that I raised there. And one of my sons actually kind of kept me in the psychiatric field. He was diagnosed with Asperger's. And so we found out very young that he was on the spectrum, and that kind of pushed me more into the psych field of like behavioral medicine and trying to, see what developmental delays and things like that look like. So I became a huge advocate alongside a behavioral pediatrician who was out of the University Medical Center there in Las Vegas. And I worked for her and managed her practice. And I served as a IEP advocate. So what I used to do is I used to go to the schools, elementary and junior and high schools, alongside parents, and I would sit there and advocate and pound my fist on the desk for the things that their children needed that teachers were oblivious to.
Yeah. You know what? I'm going to thank God that you're here in Colorado, because we need a lot more of that, and the understanding. Do you mind if I ask, Melanie, you kind of could have gone anywhere you kind of wanted. Why did you go with Pueblo Rescue Mission?
Well, I'll tell you, I was living in Las Vegas, and I was divorced, and my children had told me, my adult twins, my son and daughter, said, you know what, you need to get in a relationship. You need to find somebody. So we actually were at a mental health conference in Anaheim, California for a week, and they came with me. They didn't come for the conference. They came because they knew I was going to take them to Disneyland. But so I came back to the hotel one day, and my son says, okay, we built a profile for you, a dating profile on eHarmony. I said, what? And they said, yes, let us show you. So they showed me, and I'm reading it, and I said, I would never say any of those things. That is absolutely ridiculous. So they said, well, let us fine tune it a little bit. So they did, and I was in and out of that hotel room for that week, going to conferences. I came back one day, and they said, Mom, you have a smiley face. Somebody's interested. I said, oh, okay. So I said, let me see who this person is. So they show me, and it shows somebody in Pueblo, Colorado. And I said, why would you guys, how did you connect me to, we live in Nevada. And they said, well, Mom, you got to broaden your horizons and go, out of the States if you want to find a really good catch. You can't just look in Las Vegas. So I said, okay. So weeks turned into months, months turned into more months. And I'm kind of dating long distance, this individual who's born and raised in Pueblo, Colorado. And it actually turned out to be a good thing. And we logged a lot of miles on Frontier, flying back and forth every other weekend, to see each other. And
oh, wow.
I said, you guys are getting ready to go to college. I want to start my life. So
Yeah.
my husband now said, you put resumes in Colorado and Pueblo here, and I'll put some out in Las Vegas. The person who gets the job offer first wins. And I said, okay. So that's how I got to Pueblo.
And you won.
I won, yeah, yeah. So I came here in 2016,
Okay.
and I started working as a parole case manager when I got here. And
Okay.
I moved from there to Parkview Hospital, and I was working as a mental health therapist on a locked psych unit. And that was
Okay.
okay, and it was challenging, but
Oh,
I
yeah.
was really missing those long-term relationships because this was just about stabilizing folks within 5 days and getting
Yeah.
them back out
And
onto
then
the
you never
street.
see him again. Yeah. It's
Or
like
else they're a revolving door because you see the same ones over and
Yeah,
over and really never
sure
get it.
do.
So I thought I'm going to leave here because I want to build some long-standing relationships so I
Yeah.
can see the benefit of the therapy I'm providing.
Yeah.
So I made the decision to move and leave there and go to the Department of Corrections
Yeah.
and
Wow.
do therapy. And it was a lot of things. It was eye opening. It was soul crushing. It was difficult for me because I
Yeah.
didn't understand the environment. I don't think anybody does till you get in there.
Exactly.
It's
Yep.
very punitive, and it's a one size fits all kind of thing. And I get it. I get it that you can't give one person something you don't give another. And
Yep.
it's about firm, fair, and consistent, but they
Yep.
don't all need the same thing. A sex
Correct.
offender doesn't need the same thing as somebody who's been, incarcerated for drug use, majority of their life. And so I felt really disenchanted that I couldn't provide
Yeah.
unique therapy that they all needed. And I came home every day just depressed that I wasn't making a difference.
Yeah.
And I came home one day and I saw an ad for a executive director for the Pueblo Rescue Mission. And I
Yeah.
thought, I can go there and think outside the box and
Yep.
really try to put together some support systems for people based on what they need. And I don't have anybody telling me that that is, a violation of the administrative policies of the
Yeah.
state of
Exactly.
Colorado.
Exactly.
So I interviewed and I thought, I don't know anything about the nonprofit world. Maybe the things I know about mental health and the things I've been through in my life will be enough to fill in those gaps. And I
Yeah.
was rudely wrong, but I'm learning. I'm a work in progress and I'm learning. But they decided to take a chance on me. The board brought me in, and I sat back for a little while trying to get my sea legs.
Sure.
And very quickly I saw this revolving door of
Yep.
people coming in and out, the same people,
Yeah.
and nothing really changing,
Yeah.
And
And
so
asking for help. They want help.
they do. They
I
just
would,
don't know what kind. They don't know what kind or how to get it
yeah. Or
or
we don't have the resources. That's
exactly.
when I was working at Detox. I'm not going to mention the Detox because it doesn't matter. But I didn't have, the only thing I had money for was shipping people out of state.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's it. I didn't have money for treatment. I didn't have money for sober living. There are no halfway houses, which I think we really need some halfway houses. We need
Yeah.
reintegration living.
Yeah.
I've been homeless twice myself. Once when I was 18. I went through a place called the Phoenix Concept, and I understand homelessness. I understand what it's like.
Right.
And your day is mandated by other people. But really it's about the resources and what we have, and what we can utilize. And unfortunately, we don't have it.
Right.
We're more concerned about opening up RCOs and day centers. We don't need any more day centers. We need halfway houses.
Yeah, we do for sure.
And that's what I really like what you've done is you are meeting the needs of the people, and you're asking them what they need instead of assuming what
Right.
they need.
Well, like I said, they've all got those unique experiences, and that's what I kind of want to provide. When I sat back and looked, I thought, okay, this really comes down to unstabilized or undiagnosed mental illness,
Yep.
addiction, and poor financial management.
Oh,
which,
yeah.
Which comes obviously from mental illness and from addiction, but it also comes from generational poverty and growing up
Oh,
in a
yeah.
household where you don't think it's strange to go to the loaf and jug and buy groceries.
Yeah.
just you did it, your mom did it, maybe your grandma did it. And so I grew up, I wasn't in generational poverty, but my parents also had a catering business with catering trucks. So they had cash in hand every day. And they
Okay.
did it so irresponsibly. I remember when I was 5 or 6, we lived in a small duplex in Los Angeles, and my parents spent like $1,200 to buy a velvet couch because they just had the cash right there on hand. They didn't save, they didn't have bank accounts, and so I learned to. That's how money was modeled for me.
Yeah.
And I
Yeah.
struggled for years learning how to budget and how to take care of my money. So I knew those were the three core
Yeah.
issues.
But you probably always had a nice couch.
Yeah, I did. I did. In fact, I ended up marking on that couch with markers, so it probably was really a horrible investment. So shame on them, right? So
That's
couch
right.
your house. Don't fill it with velvet couches. So I thought I'm gonna put a program together that's going to address these three core issues
Yeah.
because these are the things that have to happen. And I hear a lot of people talk in this community and others about shortages of housing. There's no housing, there are no housing. And I agree to some extent in a lot of areas and people I know who make those same complaints, but it
Sure.
doesn't matter because if
Right.
you can't stabilize people, they'll never sustain it. So it doesn't matter
Correct.
if you have housing right now or not. You have to stabilize them first.
Yeah.
And so we started this program, and it addresses those three core issues. We've
Okay.
got recovery groups going, we've got mental health groups going, we even have some social groups going because this
Yeah.
population, they get isolated, they get very unsocial, and
Yeah.
they need to learn how to reintegrate, how to exist in, and we're not meant to do life alone. And so it's awkward
Yeah.
when they first come in. They don't feel very open. They kind of feel strange. They're sitting in an art therapy group and they don't know these other people. But
Yeah.
they learn to grow and they learn to talk with each other and share experiences, and they learn how much more alike they are than they are different. And that's the great thing about groups is groups gives you a kind of a nice way to be able to slowly open and let your guard down
Yeah.
and share and hear what other people have to say. And it's also a great way, it's also a great, I think, a measuring stick for like your own progress. Because
Yes.
I think when you're in a group, I remember I had twin daughters that passed away, and my doctor
Oh,
referred me to an infant loss support group. And when I went, probably the first couple months, they had this routine of going around the table and introducing your name and talking about your child or your children and what happened.
okay.
And it took me more than 2 months to be able to even speak my name. I couldn't do
Sure.
anything but sob. And my
Yeah.
husband would have to introduce both of us. And then as the months passed, I open up and I sit and I'm listening to other stories. Pretty soon a year passes and I see a couple come in and her face is swollen and her eyes are
Yeah.
red and she can't even say her name. And I'm talking and I can look across the table and say, wow,
Yeah.
I remember when that was me.
Yeah.
So groups do that for you. And so
Absolutely.
I love groups in that regard. So we put all these groups together in CBT groups and
Yeah.
DBT. DBT is big because I think, learning to regulate your emotions and also impulse control are huge reasons why
Yeah.
people use drugs
It,
and have
it,
addiction.
it's funny because AA is CBT, DBT with God.
Right.
I
Right.
mean, that's all AA really is reframing that mind,
Hmm.
and the actions that I take, and that takes a lot of practice.
Yeah.
And so I need to repeat, and that's why I need my peers.
Yeah. Exactly.
I believe in peer-to-peer. I believe it's the number one way. I believe recovery is free.
Yeah.
I believe in equity, recovery equity, and that's why I love the Pueblo Rescue Mission so much, because it wasn't about individualizing, but what you did was create groups that were the right arenas for the right people. You said, oh, what's the need here? And that's what I'm kind of doing up north here. I opened up an AA club where there's no AA.
Yeah.
There's no other AA in like 12 miles around,
Wow.
and it's about finding the need. Um,
We use peer supports from different organizations. Plus, my staff does groups, and that's pretty much not a requirement. But I'm lucky and I'm thankful that our staff have turned out to be people with some of the most amazing lived experiences. And
yeah,
so, when you have experiences like that, you have street cred. When I was trying to do groups
Yeah.
in the prisons, they didn't really want to know a whole lot from me about different things until I started to share. When I started to share different
Yeah.
things about my life and my experiences, that was helpful. But one of my guys, Dave, he works for me, and Dave spent almost 2 decades in prison. He was a biker and a methamphetamine producer and a very
Mhm.
violent, aggressive man. And then he
Yep.
got out and he found Christ and he was born again and he reintegrated back into his life and his family, and he married an amazing woman who's a school teacher here in Pueblo West, and he's got almost 2 decades now of sobriety under his belt. But
That's
he knows exactly what it's like. So when he comes
yeah,
into the group, he's got street cred
exactly.
and they love him for it. So those are the folks that we're always looking for to come in. And I share, I brutally share. I share things about, we had a CBT group not long ago, and we were talking about stinking thinking and how your thoughts can derail you because your
Yep.
thoughts aren't facts. And I was shared a story about my own son, who I thought was either dead on the road or he was ignoring me. And by the time the night got over with, I was so panicked. I told him, "You come get all your crap out of my basement if you can't be a decent kid and return my text messages." And then I get a text message from him that says, "I was working." He works in a prison where he can't use his phone.
Yeah.
And he said, "I was on a double. My phone was in the car. I couldn't call you." And so, in DOC, you can't share those kinds of things because they don't want
No,
you to
you
share
can't.
anything about your family or anything. But here I am
No.
with my residents saying, "Listen, you're not the only one that gets crazy like this. I go off the rails, and I
Yep.
have
I do too.
happened to me too. I am
Yeah.
imperfect and I am broken, and there is no shame in that." And I think that's the
Correct.
one thing I do. We do not operate from shame at the rescue mission. It is more damaging than drug addiction. Shame is.
Oh, the stigma that can come behind it. Yeah. Um, it's just like in AA, there's nothing worse than a recovering alcoholic that hates alcohol.
Right.
Yeah, you can't. I mean, we grew up with Looney Tunes, and Bugs Bunny would tell us things like "fight fire with fire," and he
Right.
was wrong. You
Right.
can't fight. When people say fight stigma, I'm like, you've lost. You've already
Right.
lost
Right.
because you can't fight it. You've got to come into you. It's like water flow. You've got to come into agreement with it, or you're
Right.
never going to be able to educate.
Exactly. And so we work really hard at the mission to do things like promote accountability and
Yeah.
transparency. One of my heroes and a lady I love a great deal is Brene Brown, and she
Yep.
talks about being accountable and being able to own and share your story. Because if you
Yep.
can't do that, then you have to walk outside of your story and hustle for your own worthiness. And I
That's
don't
right.
want that for any of our residents. And
No.
so that's a hard piece. If anything ever gets somebody exited or causes them to leave our program prematurely, it's that accountability piece.
Yeah,
And so
it
it's sad
is.
that happens.
And that's true of anybody that wants to change. Accountability is the number one thing in recovery.
Yeah.
It doesn't matter how long I've been sober, I'm accountable. I have a sponsor. I go to the same meeting so people see my face. I do the same thing so that people know that I'm there. And if I'm not, I will hear about it.
Yep. Yep. Someone's gonna take you to the woodshed and
Yeah. What
and
are,
show
what
you.
are some of the ways in the groups that you kind of show accountability for people that are homeless?
Well, when you come into the program, you get set up on a unique program curriculum that's based on your life experience, what you
Okay.
need. When you share your story and you talk about whatever legal issues you faced, your substance use, your mental health, any kinds of traumas, and we try to have a lot of trauma informed care going on. Your program is set up specifically for you. And then you're accountable to be in those groups. You come in, you sign in, we keep track,
Okay.
but you're accountable to be in all of those groups and to show up and to be present. And we also have social groups that are set up, and we have chores, and we try to create
There
an
we go.
environment where they kind of learn to accept a greater sense of like civic responsibility, so they care about
Yeah.
where they live. They care if it's dirty outside. And it's interesting when they come in from, we call the folks that live in our program residents. And then
Yeah.
the folks that don't live with us, who just come and get resources or just come for emergency shelter, we call them outreach.
Okay.
And once they come into the program, outreach folks will come and maybe get a meal, and they might just throw their containers on the ground or just kind of not be mindful about stuff. Man,
Yeah.
our residents are all over that. They get so infuriated when someone has to dirty their community,
Yeah,
and
it is.
that
Um,
gets fostered by those programs.
the neat thing is, because yeah, I had told you that I went through a program called the Phoenix Concept, and
Hmm.
it's government run now, so it's not the same. But we were a bunch of Skid Row drunks, and we paid our own rent. We paid our. We were self sufficient. We were accountable. We had in house meetings, and this was true sober living. And nobody had a job. None of us had a job. What we did is we made piggy banks and in fact, those plaques on my wall I made when I was 19.
Oh, wow.
But and then people would come in and give donations for the things that we made, and that's how we paid our rent.
Wow. Wow.
When you give the homeless a chance in a community, they will do something beautiful with it.
They
They
will.
will.
They will. And they
I watch
surprise,
it all the time.
yeah, they surprise me all the time. They just, and like I said, the good thing about having that program and the fact that I also still do emergency shelter is that I want everybody to want better and to want to come in and stabilize. But
Sure.
that's not the reality. There are always going to be those service resistant individuals for
Correct.
whatever reasons that just don't want it. But we live in an environment where it gets cold, and I'm never going to want to punish somebody because they don't want more for their life like I want for them. But
Yeah,
you know,
I agree. I don't think it's up to me to determine somebody else's willingness.
no, and I think one good thing about this program is that at least every week, one or two people will kind of see that
Yeah,
program because they're kind of coexisting in the same building, and they'll say, "How do you get back there where those lockers are and
exactly.
those
They'll
other
start
beds?"
to wonder.
Right.
Yeah,
And I say, well, that's a program. And I kind of use that program and I think of it as luring injured birds in with crumbs. I can get you in the door,
yeah,
to see that this is possible. Maybe you will want more. And so at least
exactly.
every week, in fact, the most women we've ever had in our program since I've been here was 12. And we just
Wow.
don't, yeah, women, we tend to shelter more men than we do women in our program.
Okay.
As of this week, we have 9. We've brought in 4 women just this week that crossed
Wow.
over from outreach and said, I've had enough of that. And
Yeah.
I can't take the rigors of living outside anymore,
Yep.
waiting till 9 p.m. when I can come in here with you. I'm ready to do this. And
Yep.
so I'm always going to want to do both because you're
Yep.
going to find yourself in different places. And my biggest why is my sister Melissa died of a heroin overdose at the age of 35, and she was
Yeah.
homeless. And she left behind a 15-year-old son and a 5-year-old daughter, and
Wow.
her addiction just it fractured our family. It made
Yeah.
everything 10 times worse for everybody. And so when I'm making decisions like that about should we even do emergency shelter, should we do this, should we just be all about a program, I try to think about creating a place and a space that I know if Melissa knocked on the door that she'd
Yeah.
be welcome.
Yeah.
So she's my why. She's the reason why when I say, you know what, I don't care if they just threw that food at the window. We've got to
Yeah.
try to find a workaround to give some people some grace, so that the Melissas of the world, have a place to go.
Can make it too. And how powerful that peer to peer is.
Yeah.
That's exactly what you're doing. And, you know, it's a very, very lonely disease. And you always feel like you're on the outside. It doesn't matter what other people do, you still feel like you're on the outside. So when you can be around other peers that are like you, that say things like, oh, I know you did that, but so, it doesn't matter. I still love you.
Exactly.
What we're doing is we're holding space for them.
Yeah.
And that is one of the most powerful ways to encourage other people. People tend to think that the homeless, that their number one priority is putting a roof over their head. And that's not true. The homeless just want another person that cares.
Exactly. When we talk about, I think the community is guilty to a great degree of, when my sister passed away, she wreaked havoc on everybody, but we were at her
Sure.
funeral and we had done a little photo montage set to music. And her son was very stoic, very guarded, very angry, and just kind of really didn't show a lot of emotion.
Yeah.
And midway through this video, there was a photo we had put in the slideshow of her pushing his bicycle when he was like 5, trying to teach him to ride a bicycle. And then all of a sudden he just broke down. And so after the service, I talked to him and I asked him what that was about. And he said he had been so ravaged by the addiction and all of the
Yeah.
horrible things that it cost them that it made him totally forget that at one point she had been a mom who
Yeah.
had tried to teach him to ride a bike. And so I
Yeah.
think that's what happens. I think a lot of people are in the community are guilty of not thinking and realizing these are moms and brothers and sisters and
Yeah, these are
children who
people.
had lives, and they're productive people that have so much to contribute, but they're being kind of pigeonholed into this one issue
Yeah.
or problem that they have, and nobody can see past it.
And they're dealing with something beyond their control, and it takes a tribe. It doesn't
Yes.
matter who it is. We don't do this alone. I've never seen anybody make it by the unaided will. And there's a lot of different paths. So yeah, for me, I do a lot of the same thing. I meet people where they're at. I figure out what's going on, and then I send them to what's going to be best for them.
Yeah.
I even do that with sponsorship. I let my sponsees know, hey, if I am not good for you or you ain't feeling it, tell me,
Right.
and I will find you another sponsor,
Right.
because it's not about me.
Yeah.
It was already about me. I don't need any more. I don't need any more.
I think the same thing about therapy too, because therapy has to be a click, and I'll tell people if I'm not it, and this hour is up and you feel like it was pulling teeth and you're like, I got to get out of this therapy session, then maybe I'm just not for you, and I don't want
Exactly.
to hacking stuff. But if you're in here and I'm like, okay, time's up, and you're like, already,
That's it.
then
Yeah,
I'm probably your gal.
that's it. Yeah. It could be tough sometimes, but I got to do what's right by the person and not what's right by me. And since I've done the work and I've gotten to that place, and it was freely given to me, then I freely give it away.
Right.
So
I like to think too that the mission is, like you talked about, needing more halfway houses. That's actually what a lot of the parole officers that I work with, because we work with reentry, and so I talk to DOC pretty much every week. They'll put me on a Zoom call with an offender who's going to be releasing, and they can't release homeless. They have to go to a sober living or a halfway house or a
yeah,
program, and
yep,
there's always waiting lists for those. And
yep.
sober living
There's
costs
the
you
other
an arm,
problem.
and sober living can cost you an arm and a leg, and sometimes half the time you get there, they're full of drugs and addiction, and they're just not healthy
Yeah,
sometimes. And so parole loves that we do this program, and they kind of liken what we do to a halfway house. There's some accountability. We do some random drug testing, and we kind of know where everybody is, and everybody's accountable, and we have
yeah,
curfews,
yeah,
but we don't charge for this program. And I have to rely on funding and getting the word out there, and trying to find every grant I can scrape together to apply for whatever money I can get.
yeah.
In fact, when I do those Zoom calls with the offenders, I'll tell them about the program, and they'll say, how much is the monthly fee for your program? And I say,
That's
there is
it.
no fee.
Free. That's what
Free.
when I went into the Phoenix concept, it cost me nothing.
Yeah.
Yeah, and we won't get into sober living today, but please, if you're going to get into sober living, please vet it, or please call me first, and I
Yeah.
will tell you,
Yeah.
because it's unregulated along with recovery coaching. So please just be very careful is what I'm going to say on that.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
But I do agree on the fact that we need more halfway houses, because what was going on is when I was in detox, these people would come in and they're willing to get sober. They're willing to get help.
Right.
But my only outlet was sober living. Well, this person's been living on the streets for 10 years.
Yeah.
They don't know how to work. They don't. So it's a setup.
Yep.
It's a total setup. And what happens is then that person gets body brokered. And I cannot be a part of that. I won't be a part of it. So now my resources become limited.
Yes.
And then what happens is that makes every sober living, every RCO guilty until proven innocent because of the way it's going. And it's unfortunate, but it's the way it is.
And I think with our programs too, we try to have them stay and go through this program, and you can stay as long as it takes to get through, to get everybody's hole that they dig is deeper than other people's. So you might
Sure.
be, I've had school teachers and attorneys come and stay in this program, and they're in and out of here in 3 or 4 months. And I have
Well,
some who are still here, and it's 14 months later because they've got a different set of circumstances and they've
yeah,
got a longer period of recovery. But my hope is that you come through this program and you get what you need from us, and we continue those wraparound services when you leave. You don't need to transition from here into a sober living. You transition
correct.
into permanent housing, independent
Exactly.
housing. That's the goal.
That is,
And
yeah, because it does make it does make a difference. And yeah, even if a person, the way I am, even if a person is drinking or drugging, I'm still a housing first person
yeah, yeah,
because I know that when it's your own roof, they can change. They may not, but that doesn't mean I want them. That doesn't mean just because they have a mental illness does not mean that they have to be out on the street. Those should not be combined.
right.
Um, and I love helping people, but I'm also the kind of person where how am I going to go help somebody clean up their backyard if mine's a mess? Well, guess
Right.
what, Colorado? Our backyard's a mess. So
It
let's
is.
stop helping everybody. Let's help ourselves. And that way we can help everybody even more.
Yeah, I agree with you. We need to take care of business at home first, and fix a lot of things, especially mental health. I'm such an advocate, and not only because that's the chosen field. Mental health affects everybody and everything.
Yep.
We all have our own personal opinions. I do not believe personally that we have a gun control problem in this country. We have a mental health problem in this
Oh,
country.
yeah. Yep.
We're
Absolutely.
teaching math, and we're teaching all of these different things in school. It's mandatory if you have to have these many years of math and this many years of civic and history, but you don't have to have any mental health.
Yeah.
And mental health is important. We've got to do something about it. And addiction too, people say, well, what about addiction? Well, I'll tell you what, your addiction issues are stemming from mental health and people who are
Mental
self-medicating their
health.
brokenness.
Yeah. Well, and when we take our abatement money and give it all to sober living instead of doing prevention programs for our schools, I mean,
Exactly.
I was pretty upset by that because
Yeah.
I went to go get prevention money. They're like, oh, we gave it all to sober living. I'm like, what do they have to do with abatement?
Yeah. I hear you.
But yeah, I know they're not going to answer that question. So,
No,
um,
no
so
comment.
Pueblo Rescue Mission is going to start their own podcast. Tell us a little
Yes.
bit about that. What are your ideas? What are your thoughts? What would you like that to look like?
Well, one of my big things is I want to do whatever education I can to kind of shift the narrative. One of the biggest problems I run into when I go and speak at different groups or clubs or organizations, they'll ask me questions at the end about things like, why do you let your people panhandle? Why do you let your people do this? And I think people are so miseducated, and they misunderstand. Um, that there are many sects of homelessness people. There are
Yeah.
people who are mentally ill. There are people
Yep.
who are in active addiction. There are people who do panhandle, but there's a whole different population out there. But the bottom line is every single one of them, good, bad, whether you like the addict or you don't, or whether you don't approve
Hmm.
of the panhandler, they have a unique story that brought them to that place.
Yeah.
And so educating people about those stories and having people understand where people are coming from,
Yeah.
I think is important. So I like to
It
go and I
is.
like to talk about that. We have a lot of success stories. Probably in the last year and a half, we've had probably close to 100 people come through the program, get employed or get a stable income for themselves, and then move out and go
Yeah.
back into the world. And I've had very few using housing vouchers. The majority of them are folks who are just out
Oh,
there paying market
yeah.
value rent
A
just to
lot of them.
continue.
Yeah, a lot of them go back to get jobs. They just needed. It's like Step Denver here. Their saying used to be, "We're a hand up, not a hand out."
Right, right. And I
And
firmly believe that.
yeah, and it's a great program. It's a reintegration program. Reintegration is the only really type. Well, we should have, but
Yeah.
because everybody kind of needs it. So that'd be neat. Yeah, educating people on why people are homeless.
And interviewing those people. I'd like to have those people on our podcast.
Yeah, and then some of the success stories that come on and tell us how they did it.
Right. And the ones that are even still in the trenches now that are maybe just starting the program or halfway through it, so that they can share what this experience is like, because a lot of them have a lot to say about the resources that were out there that they did not need and could care less about, and the resources they needed that they could not find.
That's right. That's right. And when you go into somewhere like Detox and you ask for resources and they hand you a piece of paper and tell you to make phone calls, that is not a resource. That is laziness.
And then half of those places you call no longer exist, or
they don't exist. Because nobody's keeping track and everything's unregulated.
Yeah.
So
we do a really neat thing every year since I came into the mission. We host in April. It's called the Summit on Homelessness. So we kind of try to change the theme every year. Last year the theme was success stories. So what we did was we brought all of our residents at the mission who were in varying stages of the program, and we brought all social service organizations in Pueblo, and we sat one of our residents at every table, and it was kind of like a speed dating thing. We let them sit there for 5 minutes, and those organizations got to fire off questions about, what did you get that you didn't need? What did you need that you didn't get? What brought you to homelessness? How did this happen to you? And then the bell would go off, and they'd have to switch and go to another table and hear somebody else's.
Those are great out of the box thinking. Utilizing peers is always, those are some great ideas, Melanie.
So that was last year. This year, the theme is called Resources 101. So we believe, that resources like the ones you and I have been talking about have the power, to renew and transform and restore. And so we're again inviting all those agencies to come, and they're all going to get a chance to present what they do, how they do it, where they do it, and share their resources. And I think that will help in some ways to maybe stave off and reduce some of the duplication of services we have, because we're doing budget binding and we're teaching people how to manage their money. If somebody else comes to this summit, stands up and has a whole financial empowerment program, I may stop doing that, and farm it out to them.
Well, exactly. Yeah, I'm always looking for, because we can't do it all ourselves.
Right. Right.
Like running the AA club. No, I need help. I can't do that myself. Not only that, but you don't want to. It's no fun.
Right. It kind of burns you out faster.
Yeah. I mean, part of doing this is having that community feeling and knowing, because we're the type of people that like to go to bed at night knowing I got something accomplished in my community today.
I feel
that's like what makes, happiness isn't my goal. Doing a good job is.
Yeah. So the benefit of this summit is at the end, we're going to make sure we have a scribe there, and everyone's going to be filling out a worksheet about their organization and their resources. Everybody who attends is going to get a spiral bound directory book of all of the stuff they heard those people present that day, and the things that they do, and who you call for that resource, and what event we have coming up, so that they'll have that directory to use at least for the rest of the year. Things change so much. It'll probably be good for, at least the rest of the year, but at least everybody will have a go-to place to refer people to for some stuff that they know is fresh and available.
And if we could get that online to where it all needs to stop being competitive, and we all need to come together and start working together. And anybody that thinks recovery is competitiveness, can you please just get out?
I know.
We don't need it. We've got plenty of people with servants' hearts.
Yeah, we do. I think probably a little bit of what contributes to that, and I see that too in the community we live in, is I don't necessarily think that people are siloed so much or they're kind of disconnected because of competition. I think part of it is we're disconnected because we have differences in philosophies on how we think it's the best way to help people. And which is sad, because it doesn't have to be that way. We need all of those philosophies because we have to know where they're at, and they're in a million different places.
And that's it. And considering I don't follow every philosophy, it's back to that. Well, Melanie follows that philosophy, so I can send this person over there.
Right.
And that's what we're talking. And that's the camaraderie that we're talking about, that it's okay to be different.
Yes. We
It's
don't have
okay
to
to be
agree. We can
different.
still collaborate even though we don't agree, because there's going to
Yeah.
be somebody that crosses my path that I can't do anything for, and I'm going to need you to be there so I can send
Mhm.
them to you so you can give them what they need.
That's it, and sometimes, that's what my lives are about. I go live and so that we can have harder discussions,
Right,
because my experience is my experience and that's fact, but your experience may be different and that is fact also,
right.
and it worked for you. So when we give people choices, man, yeah, they love it when they get options.
Yes, yes.
So, Melanie, this has been fantastic. I had a lot of fun talking to you.
Me too. This has been
With
great.
you, not to you. I apologize. Talking at you. Um, is there a link or anything to the April event? Do you have anything yet?
I will have it probably tomorrow. It will be on our website and people can go on and register. Um,
Okay.
and it's at our www.thepueblorescuemission.org. It should
Okay.
be up there tomorrow. It's April 5th. It's going to take place on a Friday in the afternoon. But
Okay.
everything will be up there and people can register. I've encouraged, of course, it's going to be about the social service agencies coming and presenting what they do. But I'm also encouraging people in the community to come because we have a lot, like you said, servants' hearts and people that aren't in this field, but they still run into people and they want to be able
Yeah.
to point
Like,
people in the right direction.
yeah, you're talking about me,
And there are people like I get it all the time. People will call and say, well, they used to send people over here to see if they would buy them bus tickets to leave town, and they call that agency and it's closed. And okay, well, come to this summit and listen to what's going on right now and where they can find it. And you can
Yeah,
point people in the right direction all day long just by coming and
exactly.
listening to what they do.
Yeah. And what's great about that is we can trust those resources because they're backed by Pueblo Rescue Mission. And there's a trust that goes with that. And I appreciate you taking that time in the community to build that trust first. That is something I noticed.
Thank you.
So
Thank you very much. Thank you.
I will make sure that information, if it's ready tomorrow, I'll make sure it goes up. This will be going out on Friday.
Okay.
Wow, what a great conversation. I'm really looking forward. Melanie, is there anything else that you wanted to say before we wrapped up?
I think the one thing I just want to make sure is that everybody realizes and recognizes that we can help in so many ways. I get that the program seems daunting for some. I get that some think they're above or better than emergency shelter, but
Yeah,
everybody gets to choose. This is free will, and there's something at our shelter for everybody. Maybe you'll stay with me, maybe you won't. Maybe
yeah,
you'll just come to my programs and not stay with me at all, or maybe you'll come full bore and enter the program. There are so many different ways and options we can help you. And you can start down one road and change your mind anytime. There's
yeah,
there's so much there to help people. We just really want to help people.
that's it. Wow, great stuff. So, for my listeners, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Yeah, I have fantastic listeners, and anybody that has any questions with anything that we talk about, please feel free to reach out to me. If you'd like to talk to Melanie, I will get you her information. You can always call the phone line. She is very busy, so you know.
You can email me though all day long.
Oh, there we go. Email. So I'll make sure that the email is in there.
Yeah, for sure.
So, um, this podcast was a little different. Next week we'll be back to storytelling. I have another podcast coming up next week. To all my listeners, you know, everything that we do and everything that we touch needs to have some kind of action or intent behind it that is good. So while we're out there with our serpent's hearts doing what we're doing, let's always remember to check our intentions. Or what are we trying to get out of it? Are we trying to help people? Are we trying to brag? What are we actually doing with it? And then let's take that information, be honest with ourselves. um Thank you everybody for being here. I love you, I do. Peace out and have a day.